Now here's a monitor I've been really looking forward to reviewing for some time now, the Viewsonic Elite XG270. Now if you remember, back in the day, Viewsonic monitors were considered to be among the very best monitors on the market, but it's been a couple of years since I've used one, or actually since I've seen something that really stood out. But lately, Viewsonic really stepped up their game and released a couple of gaming monitors that look really interesting, and this is one of them. So this is a 27-inch Full HD monitor that has an IPS panel and 240 Hz refresh rate. There's also a Quad HD version, the XG270QC, with a refresh rate of 165 Hz, and I'm truly hoping to get my hands on that one as well. Now, I know what you're thinking, 240 Hz IPS isn't something we haven't seen before. In fact, I even reviewed the Asus TUF Gaming VG279QM that uses a very similar panel from AU Optronics, and you even had an option to overclock that one to 280 Hz refresh rate. If you want to check that video out, I'm going to leave a link somewhere up here as well as in the description down below. However, Viewsonic has a couple of things that really make it stand out. Now first, it has a lot of extra features and a great build quality. And second, it's supposed to offer one of the best, if not the best, anti-motion blur technologies on the market. Now, price is a bit of a difficult subject as it completely depends on where you are. So if you live in the US, it will cost you $430, which is a very nice, very competitive price. But here in the Netherlands, it costs 550 euros, and that's a very difficult price tag. But pricing aside, let's see how this monitor actually performs, how does it compare to some other monitors I've reviewed so far, and if it's worth considering at all. Let's go. This video is brought to you by Corsair and their K95 RGB Platinum XT mechanical keyboard. The new K95 features a beautiful aluminum design, cherry MX switches, dedicated media buttons with an extra row for dedicated macro keys, extra durable PBT caps, and a very comfortable and soft wrist rest. Check it out using the links in the description below. Out of the box, the Viewsonic makes an excellent impression. It is exceptionally well built with a beautiful and elegant metal stand that's not too deep, standing at 26 centimeters. In my opinion, 27 inch is such a nice size for a gaming monitor. It has nice small physical bezels on the sides and on the top, although the display doesn't really start right there like we see in most monitors nowadays. You can adjust the height, you can tilt it, rotate it or swivel it around, or even VESA mount it if you want to. Unlike the very Spartan Asus TUF monitor, Viewsonic really went full on the extras here. Now first, there is RGB on the back as well as on the underside of the panel that's software controllable, or you can even turn it off if you want to. And they also added a headphone hanger on the left side, which I think is a very nice extra, as well as a mouse bungee on each side of the monitor for both left and right-handed gamers. Again, something I think some of you will really appreciate. They also include a hood, a cover on both sides of the monitor that helps distractions and reflections. Now the connections are a full set as well. One display port, two HDMI 2.0 ports, an audio out, a 3-port USB hub, and a Kensington lock option. While speakers are included too, like on almost every other monitor out there, you really don't want to rely on them for gaming or watching movies, but they are good enough to follow an informative video like this one, for example. Now, controlling the settings is done using a little joystick on the bottom and two extra buttons. It works well enough, and it includes all the typical options like multiple default profiles, some specific game modes, as well as a crosshair option. However, the menu isn't as intuitive and the joystick isn't as accurate as we've seen on other monitors, so it's quite loose, and if you try to press it, it can easily jump to the next setting instead. It is not a reason to opt against this monitor, but Viewsonic should look into this and improve it in the future. Now, thankfully, you can control most settings through the included software using your mouse and your keyboard as well. I think the software too can use a bit of polish, and I'm not sure why the crosshair option, for example, cannot be found in the software menu, but it gets the job done well enough. So let's talk gaming, and let me start by saying that these latest IPS panels from AU Optronics are very fast, especially considering the fact they're IPS panels. Now the speed and the motion clarity on this thing is just amazing. As I said in the Asus review, this monitor shows that the fast IPS panels are the future for mid-range and high-end gaming, as they're basically as fast as the fastest TN panels on the market with a much better overall image quality. Playing any game on this thing is a joy, but playing fast games at 240-ish FPS is fantastic. And yes, if you are really competitive, the difference between the 240Hz monitor and 144Hz alternatives is really significant and something worth considering. Since this is a FreeSync and a G-Sync compatible monitor, even if you play heavier titles and your GPU isn't that strong, you'll have a guaranteed smooth synced image. Now, I know a lot of you don't like 1080p or 27-inch monitors, and I agree. 1440p is a sweet spot if you game and use your PC for a lot of non-gaming applications, but honestly, if most of your PC use is gaming, there is a lot to be said for 1080p as well. It is still sharp enough for most games, and it's much easier to get higher frame rates on 1080p than you would get on 1440p. So if you care more about performance than immersion, especially on less than high-end hardware, 1080p is still pretty hard to beat. Now, unfortunately for Viewsonic, the TUF gaming monitor came in first, and side by side, the difference between TUF's 280Hz and Viewsonic's 240Hz can be seen, at least if you look very closely. Now, would you see the difference if you bought one or the other? Very unlikely, as even in ideal situations, we're talking about less than a 1 millisecond difference here, with the XG270 still ranking among the fastest monitors I've seen so far. Now, the big ace up Viewsonic's sleeve is the anti-motion blur backlight strobing they call PureXP, something they're really pushing with their Blur Busters approved badge. And unlike the TUF gaming, the XG270 cannot combine its anti-motion blur with G-Sync or FreeSync, so it's not as flexible. However, the execution of the strobing is excellent, both at 240Hz as well as 120Hz, but there is still no 60Hz options. If you're a huge anti-motion blur fan and you're fine with the static refreshes, meaning that you will need to lock your game to either 120 FPS or 240 FPS and turn your VSync on, this is really impressive. While backlight strobing really limits your display brightness, for example, TUF gaming monitor will only reach 176 nits with anti-motion blur on, with the latest firmware update, Viewsonic actually gives you several PureXP modes to choose from, so you can actually balance the strength of the anti-motion blur and the brightness. So you can set it to light or normal if you're in a light room or during daytime, and at night or in a dark room you can set it to extreme or even ultra. So if backlight strobing is something you're really into, this does offer some unique advantages. For anyone that's really crazy about this topic, I will leave a link down in the description below where people go even further with fine-tuning this Viewsonic strobing. Let's move on to the next topic, HDR. And this monitor too has an HDR mode and can recognize the HDR signal, but that's pretty much it. In HDR, the maximum brightness doesn't really go higher than it does in the SDR mode, and there is no local dimming backlight, so basically there is no point in this whole HDR feature. I'm sure most of you know by now that if you want to benefit from HDR, you should look into at least a display HDR 600 label, but still I think it's important to point this out for those of you that are new to HDR. Thankfully, Viewsonic doesn't really advertise the HDR as a feature, so I'm not gonna hold it against them much this time. Besides, HDR simply isn't something any current 240Hz monitor can do, so if you want proper HDR, you'll have to look at a different class of a monitor. Let's take a look at the factory calibration next, and while you don't expect it from a panel that is really focused on speed, it shows some pretty great results. Now, maximum brightness is at respectable 391 nits. The screen is nicely dimmable with a minimum brightness of 26 nits, and when set to 250 nits, the power consumption is pretty good at just under 30 watts. The gamma curve is close enough to perfect with a 2.24 average, and the white balance is absolutely spot on at 6504 Kelvin. The contrast is a little under what we like to see on an IPS panel at 951:1, but it's actually pretty hard to tell the difference between this one and the TUF monitor. The color accuracy, on the other hand, is phenomenal. sRGB gamut coverage is 99%, color calibration is near perfect with excellent average and peak delta E values, so basically, these are the results we would consider great for a professional editing monitor, and for a gaming monitor, they're pretty exceptional. Gray balance is ultimate as well, and the uniformity is very comfortably above average in both a full wide display as well as when looking at a multiple sample average. The viewing angles are excellent as expected from an IPS display, but our sample does show a bit of backlight bleed. A bit on the right side as well as on the left corner. It is hard to see in normal use, but in darkness it is visible, so Viewsonic really has to keep an eye on their quality control to ensure that retail models are at least better than this one and not worse. Still, while you might not consider this primarily for photo or video work, after all it's only a 1080p display, the fact that the image is calibrated so well is still a good thing. It helps the image quality subjectively, as well as lets you do some casual creative things without worrying about the colors on your screen being completely off. So, let's round this up. The Viewsonic XG270 is a really impressive monitor. It is one of the fastest monitors on the market, offering both really excellent fast-moving images with close to zero blur, as well as an excellent overall image quality that's great for gaming, as well as non-gaming tasks. It is well built, it has a decent OSD and software controls, it is G-Sync and Freesync compatible, and it is objectively a great monitor to consider. It does have a really tough competitor out there, the TUF Gaming VG279QM, that can run at 280 Hz and can combine anti-motion blur with variable refresh rates, something that the Viewsonic cannot do. But on the other hand, the XG270's fixed anti-motion blur is just exceptional. It also has a slightly better image calibration out of the factory, and it's built a bit nicer, and it comes with some nice physical extras like the hood, the headphone hanger, the built-in mouse bungees, and the RGB, if you care about that sort of thing. So the XG270 is competitive in its own way, depending on what you care about, of course. So between the two monitors, you have to figure out for yourself what is important to you, as well as consider the price, because in the US, for example, the XG270 will cost you $400 to $430, and I think there are arguments to be made for both monitors with no real right or wrong choice. But if you're in the EU, with a price tag of 550 euros, you will have to spend 150 euros more for the Viewsonic than on the TUF Gaming, and that's a very big difference to justify. So if Viewsonic wants to compete here in the EU as well, they really need to make sure that this price comes down by a lot. Now, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this review and about this monitor. Don't forget to subscribe, give me thumbs up, and see you in the next one, guys. Bye!